welcome to GCSA TV virtual live stage. I am not sitting in front of you in Las Vegas this year. I'm here on a day sponsored by the Andersons, one of our sponsors for the GCSA Live virtual live show. I'm Frank Rossi. I'm a professor at Cornell University, and I'm joined today by four members of the Andersons team. Chuck Anderson, the Vice President of Innovation, Dave Lutit, the Territory Manager, Ed Price, the Territory Manager, and Tyler Warner, also a Territory Manager. And we're here to talk about the TNT tool and, to talk to one of the great fertilizer companies that's been in the turf business for a really, really long time. So let's start with you, Chuck. Tell me a little bit about the history of the Andersons fertilizer company in the professional turf business, because you're also in other businesses as well.
Absolutely.
But we'll talk a little bit about the Andersons company in turf.
Yep. Well, first of all, Frank, I've been in the turf industry for 35 years and have not met you before, so it's nice to meet your acquaintance. You're sort of a legend. I almost feel like I should be interviewing you.
Well, thank you for the kind words, and I'm sure everybody's a little bit disoriented, but it is a very strange way for us to meet. I have also been in this industry for the better part of 35 years, so it is amazing we haven't met, but it's a pleasure to meet you now. Can I assume the name is associated with the company?
It is. So my grandfather started the company. We were incorporated in 1947, but he started working much earlier than that, before the war. Ran into trouble in his first attempt, but he didn't give up. He had 7 kids with his wife, Margaret, really talented family all the way around. So they gave it another try after World War II and were extremely successful. The core of the business is in the grain industry. So that is our roots. So he was extremely competent in the grain industry, and really a big lean on service, customer service and marketing. But with that, they had a really high interest in getting into other things, adjacent markets. So 5 years after they started their very successful grain business, they opened up a retail store. So customers from the area was originally intended for farmers, but you start having people from town, the town folks coming in, buying things like bikes, refrigerators, things like that. Well, it wasn't very long before they started selling turf fertilizer, and they thought, well, geez, how hard can this be? And so they were selling, like 7,000 tons of fertilizer in the first or second year out of that facility.
One store.
One store, one very small store, which the building is still there today. And this is early 50s, and they started experimenting with first fertilizer for the farms, and then they branched off about 10 years later into turf fertilizer. And they had early crabgrass preventers and things like that. So it wasn't long before they started getting into combination products with fertilizer. But ultimately, they started to get some traction in that industry, and were eventually selling to companies like Kmart. So we supplied Kmart's in the region, as well as Frank's Nursery and Crafts. We ended up eventually doing all the Walmarts across all of the U.S. But during this time, we were doing a lot of work with the pro lawn care operators, and eventually into golf courses. So it was something of a learning that we continued to just get really competent in that industry. And then really we took a major step in 2000 when we bought the Scotts Professional business. Right. Most people believe that we did that just to get Dave and Ed, because we tried to hire them away from Scotts and they wouldn't, so we just bought the business instead.
Well, let me interrupt you, because that's no small move. The Scotts professionals, the people that were out and about, the people I used to know in the Midwest, one of the last ones, Wayne Horman, and Dale Wentz was another one. There was a lot of Scotts guys. Everybody knew the Scotts guy. And at the same time, those products were always revered for their ability to disperse and be formulated in a way that was far and away better than almost everything else out there. So I would say it was brilliant to get Ed and Dave on board for that reason, but also because that dispersible granule technology that you guys brought to the market, I still think is a market leader in the use of granular products across the board for all the reasons that everybody knows about dispersible granules. But that was a major innovation, and that's our topic for today is innovation.
Yes.
So let me pass it to Ed and ask a little bit about the TNT tool, how it works, and how do you work with superintendents to use this turf nutrition tool that was developed by the Andersons.
Well, good morning, and thank you, Frank, for the question. Superintendents utilize the TNT in a variety of fashions. They create a custom nutritional program which models the nutrient release, in a very personalized fashion. Different parts of the country, we have different turf grasses, different growing seasons, different conditions that take place, of course, and we take that into consideration. That's probably the neatest thing about the TNT is that we look at these plants' response and the nutrient loads with those plants in certain geographic areas. We've got specific geographic growing zones that you can put in, and you can also customize it to have specific square footages for your tees, your greens, your fairways. And you can also specify the TNT into certain cultural management needs and wants of your turf, a greens program, a tee program, a fairway program, and the like. For planning reasons, the superintendent, builds this separate green tee fairway program, and it does create a nice blueprint in which to follow for the year. The crew can look at the inventory levels, things of that nature. Creating an aeration program or a new construction program can be part of that TNT. And as you said eloquently, Frank, our dispersible granules are really great for baseline nutrition. And of course, baseline nutrition is very big. And then you could come back and augment with some of those foliar applications, and you can get those on the turf nutritional tool.
So let me interrupt again, Ed, and talk about the sauce a little bit, right? The secret sauce that's in the TNT, because when you're talking about geographical regions, and then you're talking about greens, tees, and fairways, you're talking about multiple climates, you're talking about a variety of soils, you're talking about sort of algorithms and science and microbiology and breakdown of organic matter. It isn't just simply the nutrients, right? I mean, we supplement with nutrients, but does the tool also consider the climate conditions and the soil conditions and how the soil might be able to supply those nutrients depending on your location?
To a certain extent, for sure. We take into consideration, those geographic reasons, like myself in the West, when we have winter, coming and going, versus down south, we do take into consideration climate and geographic locations. There's no question.
So you teed it up perfect for me to start asking Dave and Tyler about programming for the different regions of the country. So, Tyler, let's start with you in the warm season grasses, because these guys are going to be growing, obviously in the desert and in places where it's warm. They're growing grass now. And soon in, much of the transition zone, they'll start thinking about, greening up their grass. How do you work with warm season superintendents and using the turf nutrition tool?
Well, thanks, Frank. Yeah, the turf nutrition tool has been a game changer for turf grass managers in planning and developing their nutrition programs. Because when I talk to customers, what I like to tell them is the TNT tool really helps them pick the right product at the right time of year to get the release that they're looking for. Because in our industry, foliars have become a big part of overall fertility to control growth. And what this TNT tool does is show turf grass managers that you can control growth by using granular products if you're using the right granular products at the right time of year. For instance, with a customer in Florida, I use this example a lot. Typically in that region of the country, it's not uncommon for them to make 6 granular applications a year, every other month. And what I showed this particular customer was, look at all the peaks and valleys by doing that in that rotation. 2 of our most widely used products, great products, but weren't necessarily being used in the right manner. And so the TNT tool can really help change that mindset on granular fertility products. And so now that particular customer is doing more frequent, but doing different analysis at different times of the year as the climate changes to get the response and level out that release curve, so he doesn't have those peaks and valleys that a lot of guys have typically seen over the years using granular products.
That's right. And so it sounds like, Dave, for the cool season guys with a shorter season, what I thought I heard Tyler alluding to is, you can have a granular program, but you might need some foliar products over the top of it. Is that what you're talking to the cool season guys about, except in a more condensed way, or are there some other nuances when you start getting into the northern turf areas?
Well, as compared to my friend Tyler there, we certainly have a shorter season. So our, here in the Great Lakes, our growing season is going to be from depending on the year, we get going here around mid-April, and the real growing season goes through mid-October. And to follow up on what Tyler said, boy, in the 33 years I have combined between Scott's and the Andersons, we've seen a shift from virtually all granular to probably more than 50 or 60% of the nutrients now being applied in a liquid form. So, Frank, what we've done with our superintendents here is we've created, I would say, the hybrid approach to the TNT. We find ourselves using more soluble type fertilizers in the springtime and the fall, maybe have a little more ammonium sulfate or urea in there for that cool weather response. And then we would give a little bit of baseline nutrition in maybe early to midsummer. And then as our superintendents are out there with their spray programs or fungicides or wetting agents, we've gone to an over the top foliar application on a 2-week interval, and that allows us to give steady, even control throughout the entire growing season.
Excellent. So listen, Ed, I'm going to go to you, Ed, and then Chuck, I want to give you a last chance to talk about innovation. But Ed, there's been a push for collecting clippings and monitoring growth. Does the TNT tool have any capacity for me to integrate some of the data I might be collecting about growth and response?
That's a great question, Frank. I've got superintendents that do clipping yield studies, and they match it right up with their turf nutritional tool. And that's where science and field studies really, these superintendents are having these aha moments. And that's very, very good question. And the answer is yes, sir. There are lots of superintendents that are using clipping yield to monitor with the TNT, their further nutritional inputs.
Well, Chuck, we started with you. Let's end with you. It's a long history. And, what's to me fascinating about the TNT tool is that it's not a sort of product in the sense like it's a bag of something or a jug of something. And I'm really pleased to see whenever companies make the commitment to not just sell them a bag or a jug, but maybe a process that if they wanted to use other products, not that we're telling people to do that, but this way of approaching it helps the industry to deal with these fertility issues. Is that the kind of innovation we can continue to expect to see from the Andersons in the future?
Yeah, absolutely, Frank. And I would say there's a little bit of a slant towards sustainability in our research. You'll see much more carbon-based materials in our products here going forward, as well as what we call recycled or reused phosphorus in the form of magnesium ammonium phosphate, which is very strategic for us. So I think you'll continue to see sustainable solutions, innovation, a lot of DG type products. So you'll continue to see innovation from the Andersons for a number of years here.
Thank you very much, Chuck, and thank you all for joining me on the GCSA Virtual Live TV stage, presented in fact by the Andersons Group that I'm joined with today. I'm Frank Rossi. We'll be back in a little bit.